Hello, year two. Welcome back. I'm so glad to be teaching you for another history lesson. I'm Mr. Hutchinson, and we're learning all about what we're learning about? The Shang dynasty. That's right. We're learning all about the Shang dynasty in ancient China. This is lesson 3. If you've missed the first 2 lessons, you can go back on the website to week 1 and you can watch those first. For everybody that's ready for lesson 3, make sure you've done the quiz. Did you do it? How many did you get right? Oh, you're amazing. Don't worry if you got a few wrong. That's okay. It still helps you to remember the correct answers, even if you get them wrong. So that's absolutely fine. Well done for giving it a go. Take a moment. Take a deep breath. Have you got a pen? Or a pencil? That's fine. Good. Have you got a piece of paper? Or a book? Brilliant. Have you got a drink? Maybe some water? Have you got your brain switched on? Then we're all ready to go. Make sure you've got no distractions around you. Before we start, I need to say an absolutely huge shout out to a child who has sent their work through. So their parents went onto Twitter and they sent through a piece of work for me. And that person's name is Millie. And Millie did this amazing story using her ancient Chinese characters, and I was so impressed. It's so neat. The Chinese characters are drawn so beautifully, and I thought that this was a great piece of work. So well done to Millie. You are a real star. If anybody else would like to send their work through, please do. I would love to see it. I'd love to see your hard work. I'm so proud of you for working so hard. Today, we're going to be learning about what life was like for people in the Shang dynasty. What was life like when people living in the Shang dynasty, all of those thousands of years? And so to do that, we're going to first look at a timeline. Then we will think about a place called the Yellow River, a river called the Yellow River in China. Then we'll learn about what kind of food and drink people in the Shang dynasty ate and drank. Then we'll think about social classes, different groups of people. So a social class is a different group of people that have different kinds of things. And then we've got our end of lesson quiz. So let's start with our timeline. Here is our timeline. You can see it here. And let's put 2020 on there, the year that we are in now. This is now. Point to now. Great. That's where we are now. Now, I was born. How old do you think I am? You can have a look at me. Can you see any wrinkles? Well, look, there's some wrinkles there. How old do you think I am? Did you say 22? Well done. You are... No, I'm not 22. I am 31. And that means that I was born in 1988. So I'm going to put that on there. 1988 on this number line. And you can see that it's right next to 2020. It's very, very close on my number line because it's only 31 years. And this number line goes all the way back to the year 0, when we started counting the years. It's not the start of time, it's just when we started counting the years. And it's when Jesus was born. And so this period here is 2020 years. From 0 to 2020 is 2000 years. And if we go back another 1,600 years, then we get to when the Shang dynasty started. So it's 2,000 years to get to 0, and then another 1,600 years. So how much altogether? 2,000 add 1,600 is 3,600, or 3,620 if you added the 20 on as well. So it's a really long time ago. And the Shang dynasty lasted for almost 600 years. The Shang dynasty ended around 1066 BCE. So it lasted for about 534 years. That's how long it lasted for. And that was the Shang dynasty. Now, that's a really long time. Over 500 years is a really, really long time. And so life wasn't the same for the Shang all through that different period. It changed. Of course it did. We don't live in the same way that people lived 300 years ago, did we? So when we talk about the Shang dynasty, we're going to be talking about how they lived quite generally, okay? And it will have been different at different times, but that's okay. We're just going to talk about generally, how is the Shang dynasty different to what it's like today in 2020. So the first thing I'd like you to do, the first task, is have a look at that timeline. And I'd like you to copy it into your book or your piece of paper. So draw it with a nice straight line. If you've got a ruler or something straight that you can use, draw it with a straight line. And then I'd like you to draw in any other events you know. It could be some other events that you've studied in history in your school that you know when they were. It could be important events in your life or in people that you know's life. Write down any events that you know and add them into this number line. Pause the video and do that now. Great, well done everybody. So we've done the first part of our lesson. We know when it was and that it was over a long period of time and it would have been different across that bit of time. So that's when it was. Where was it? Well, the Shang dynasty was on something called the Yellow River. So there's a river and it's still there in China now called the Yellow River. So let's go back to our map. Can we find China? There it is. Point to China. Point to China on our map. Point to England, where we live, and point to China. Let's zoom into China. Get ready. I need your help to zoom. So we're going to zoom by doing this, like grab the screen and put it towards you. 3, 2, 1. Oh, well done. You did it. So we've zoomed into China. And if you look very carefully, you will be able to see that there are some little blue lines. And those little blue lines are rivers. And we're going to be looking at one of those rivers. So let me make the river that we're looking at a little bit clearer for you now. So I'm going to change the map a little bit. And it's this river here, the Yellow River. So go back, see if you can find it on this map. I'll show you it again. Here it is. Curves across, goes up and around. Can you find that river on this map? And that's called the Yellow River. What's it called? Say it to me. Tell your screen. It's called the... Good. It's called the Yellow River. Why is it called the Yellow River? Why do you think that it's called the Yellow River? Have a little bit of a think. Why do you think it's called the Yellow River? Did you say it's called the Yellow River because it's yellow? If you did, then you're right. The Yellow River often looks yellow. Here's a picture of it. This is actually a picture of Y2W02L01 waterfall, the biggest waterfall on the Yellow River. And it looks yellow. It looks yellow because it's full of silt. Silt is like a kind of sand. It's a kind of sand that usually is on the bottom of a river. But in the Yellow River, it's all through the river because it's moving so quickly. There's a that's a really good thing because that silt makes the land fertile. My turn, your turn. Fertile. Fertile. Good. If something is fertile, it means that lots can grow out of it. So if land is fertile, you can grow lots of things. So that's really wonderful that the Yellow River makes the land fertile so that the Shang people could grow things. And that's why they lived around the Yellow River. But it wasn't all good. It was all or the river of sadness. Why do you think it was called the river of sorrow? Why do you think it was called the river of sadness? Well, sometimes that silt would get so much that it would clog up the river and it would flood, and that river would then drown people or flood their fields or wash their houses away. And so it was kind of like the river of sorrow, the river of sadness. In one way, it was bringing them life because it was putting the silt down that would let their plants grow so that they can eat. But in another way, it was the river of sadness because it would clog up with that salt sometimes and drown everybody. And so it was the river of sorrow. And people would grow wheat. They would grow wheat around the Yellow River because it was a really good place to grow wheat. And we use wheat to make flour. I've been looking for some flour recently because I want to do some baking, but I can't buy any flour anywhere. Everybody's already bought it because they're enjoying baking as well. But the Shang people had lots of wheat, and they got all of this from the Yellow River. So let's try that vocabulary one more time. There's silt. You say it. And what is salt? What is silt? Good. It's kind of like sand or mud at the bottom of the river or in the river. It makes the land fertile. Your term, fertile. What does it mean if land is fertile? Good. It means that things can grow in the land. It's called the river of sorrow. Why was it called the river of sorrow? Good. It would flood and drown people or wash their houses away. And what did people grow? Good. What did they grow? Good. And what can you make out of wheat? You can make flour, which makes bread. Excellent. So let's see if you can put all of that new knowledge about the Yellow River and the Shang Dynasty to the test. I've got 3 sentences for you. Okay, I'm going to give you 3 sentences, and I want you to finish these sentences. Here they are. Copy and complete these sentences. First, the Yellow River was important to the Shang Dynasty, but. Next, the Yellow River was important to the Shang Dynasty because. And finally, the Yellow River was important to the Shang Dynasty, so. So you need to think about the Yellow River within the Shang Dynasty and think about how people used it in different ways and how you can think about it in different ways by finishing those sentences. Pause the video and finish those sentences now. Where you're working so hard there, thinking really hard all about the Yellow River. So you might have said here that the Yellow River was important to people in the Shang Dynasty, but it would sometimes flood and kill everybody or drown everybody. You might have said the Yellow River was important to people in the Shang Dynasty because it made the land fertile, or the silt made the land fertile so that they could grow wheat. And you might have said the Yellow River was important to the Shang Dynasty, so they lived close to it and the civilization built up around it. If you wrote those ideas, then you can give yourself a tick. If you didn't, then you could always pause the video and edit it to add in those ideas. So we've already got a bit of a clue about the sorts of things that the Shang Dynasty were growing, that people in ancient China around the Shang were growing. Let's find out a little bit more about that by turning our attention now to food and drink. So we're going to look at 3 things that lots of people in the Shang Dynasty would eat and drink. They would drink lots of beer because you can make beer from the different kinds of grains that they were growing. You put them in a barrel, you put some yeast in, let it mix up and let it ferment and leave it, and then you've got beer. And beer can actually give you some nutrients because it's kind of bready because it's used with the same stuff that you make bread. So they would use beer as part of their diet. They might also use that wheat to make bread, and they might also use cheese. These were common things that people in the Shang Dynasty ate. Sometimes when we think about China, we think people eat a lot of rice or noodles, and they drink a lot of tea. That's not really the case in the Shang Dynasty. In the northern fields where the Shang people were, it wasn't good for growing rice. That's better in the south of China. We're looking at the north of China, and it's better to grow wheat for bread in the Shang Dynasty. So they didn't really grow tea plants, and they didn't really grow rice plants. They grew wheat, and they used that to make beer and bread. They were more likely to have those sorts of things. So let's put that to the test. Let's see if you can remember what they ate and drank. Here's a question for you. I'd like you to write out this sentence, but I've tried to trick you by giving you 2 options. So people living in the Shang Dynasty would eat bread or rice, which is the right one, and they would mostly drink tea or beer, which is the correct one. Pause the video and write it out with the correct options now. Great, well done, you're awesome. Got your options there. Let's see if they were correct. You should have that they mostly ate bread and they mostly drank beer. So your sentence should read, people living in the Shang Dynasty would mostly eat bread and drink beer. Well done if you got those options. Give it a tick. If you didn't give it those options, remember, it doesn't matter. You can just, with a different color pen, you can just neatly put a line through it and edit it so you got the right ideas. So we know where they lived, we know when they lived, we know what they ate and drank. Let's find out a little bit about this idea of social classes. Social classes, try and say it, social classes. Good. So a social class is just a sort of group, and we usually group people together by things like how much money they have, what kinds of jobs they have, where they sort of like live, and we call people that are similar jobs and similar amounts of money, we say they're in one group, one social class. So what sort of social classes were there in the Shang Dynasty? Well, right at the bottom, there were the what we sometimes call the working class, people that worked all day long. They might be farmers or soldiers or craftsmen, making sort of like different sorts of like things, crafty things, different kinds of pots or weapons. And they were right at the bottom. They didn't get paid very much. They probably didn't own their own land. They were at the bottom. Above them, we have what's sometimes called the noble classes. So the noble classes, they didn't have work so much because they owned lots of land and they owned lots of wealth. Money in the Shang dynasty was paid. That was for money. They used cowrie shells, which were a special kind of seashell, like a curly shell. They used that as money. Now, some people would have lots and lots of cowrie shells, and they give them to their children, and they'd lend them out so that they can get more back. And so they had lots of cowrie shells and money and power, and that's the noble classes. So the working classes, they don't have so much money. They have to work a lot for not much money because they don't own their land. The noble classes, they have lots of servants and they own lots of land. And the priests and the royal family, they would be there. Right at the top is the emperor, the most powerful and the richest person in the empire. But actually, there's somebody above the emperor who we'll find out a little bit more about in the next lesson. So this is a little bit of a teaser, because the emperor, you'll remember, became emperor when there was a mandate of heaven. Who gave the mandate of heaven? Those were the gods or their ancestors. And Shang was the name of their supreme god, their main god. So let's put all of that to the test. I'd like you in this task to put down some different ideas of people who were working class in the Shang dynasty and people that were in noble class. What were the differences between those two groups of people? Pause the video and write down all the differences that you can now between those two different groups. Well done. I've jotted down some answers, and so I'm going to put them down and see if you got the same ideas. And if you didn't, you can add them in to improve your notes. So the first difference that I think that I got was that the jobs that they had. So the working classes would be farmers or craftsmen or soldiers, and the noble classes might be priests or royal family or landowners. Second of all, the noble classes would have lots of servants and people to work for them, whereas the working class would work for the landowner or the noble classes. Working classes would probably live in the countryside in basic homes, and the noble classes would live in palaces in big cities. Working classes would just have kind of basic food like the bread and maybe some cheese and the beer, whereas the noble classes would be able to afford to slaughter animals and have luxury foods and meat. And the working classes wouldn't have much money, whereas the noble classes would have lots and lots of cowrie shells. So well done, everybody. That's the end of our lesson, and we covered a lot in that lesson. So well done for working so hard. I would love to see your work, just like Millie at the start. I'd love for you to send in your work, and you can do that. Your parents need to do it, and they need to send a tweet with Learn with Oak, and that should go to @OakNational. And if you put that hashtag, then I'll be able to see it and I'll be able to read your work. And I would love to read your work because you're working so hard, and I'm really proud of you, and you should be really proud of yourself. And I want to read your work so I can see it and tell you how brilliant you are at history, learning all about the Shang dynasty. And I'll see you for lesson 4 of the Shang dynasty. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye.